Good afternoon, Jordan. How are you?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, delighted to have you here. First things first, I'd love if you would introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, maybe where you are in the world today, and just a little bit about yourself.
Like metaphorically where I am or physically where I am?
Well, both. Jordan, you can bring either, whichever you prefer, or maybe like where you are in your life's journey. Whatever you want to share is totally fine.
That's deep, bro. That's deep.
Yeah, we're going meta right away.
Yeah, I'm like, dang, I wasn't ready for that. I need more coffee. I'm in San Jose, California. That's where I physically am. Metaphorically, though, man, I am a new father. I got a 10-month-old baby.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, he's awesome. He cries a lot and doesn't sleep enough, but that's how fatherhood begins, I believe.
Yes.
And I've been running my show, the Jordan Harbinger Show, for something like 14 years now. I'd have to do the math, but it's got to be some little bit over that. And I just love it. I love interviewing. I love radio/podcasting. I'm definitely sort of like a podcast native. Had one of the first podcasts in the world. Mm-hmm. Definitely one of the first podcasts in the world, or one of the only ones that started in 2006 that's still going and has consistently been going since then.
Yeah.
Which is funny because now it just seems like ridiculous, an insanely ridiculous long time ago. Yeah. Because I guess I was only 26 back then. And I do a lot of different angles on the show, right? Like I love being able to do the podcast because I can guide it towards my own interests. A lot of podcasts are like, my show is about business owners that are living with dogs in Central Florida over 50. And I'm like, cool, but you're, like some point you might want to branch out a little.
Yeah.
And I get that, I've made that mistake, but now I've got everyone from hackers that talk about how election machines get hacked and how the Russians and Chinese are attacking us, our info system all the time, all the way to Howie Mandel or Kobe Bryant, talking about something that obviously has nothing to do with computer hacking or information security. So I really can sort of run the gamut. And I got to tell you, it's in many ways, it's a dream job to read a book, sit down with the author of the book, joke around and talk about the content of the book, use stuff I've got in my house to videotape and record it and then put it up on the internet and then get paid. It's like, how did I get away with this? Sometimes I got to pinch myself. And then I realized I've been doing it for 14 years to get the recipe right. So it's like, it's about damn time.
Yeah, it's funny. So when you started podcasting in 2006, I'm pretty sure I wasn't listening to podcasts, nor did the iPhone wasn't out in 2006. So no. I guess you had to listen on an iPod. And for those listening who don't know what that is, that's the thing that's not a phone, but can play music and podcast.
Correct.
I'm thinking, I just saw a stat now. I think as of now, there's like 750,000 active podcasts or like are actually on the platforms like Spotify, obviously Apple and some of the other things, Stitcher and some of the things out there. Like it's insane. Like, do you actually know how many podcasts there were when you were out live and getting subscribers? Like how many podcasts were actually available to listen to?
I do remember trying to find this information back then. And I remember asking somebody who worked for like one of the only podcast hosts at the time. Mm-hmm. And I want to say they said they had like 90% market share in podcast hosting. And I think they had like 800 customers, which means that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to maybe 1,000 podcasts at the time. Yeah.
It's
now
incredible.
there are over 1 million. Now there's 2,000 added it's either every day or every week, which is freaking insane. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, and we'll get into the meat of the show here in a minute, but I just have to comment also on this. Like, this is my podcast that I own, just like you own yours. I do it. I've been doing it since January of this year, and people be like, "What's your specialty in your podcast?" I'm like, I just interview people that I want to talk to, and they're like, "Well, what do you talk about?" I'm like, I don't know, like whatever the guest wants to talk about. It's always interesting, and I'm so with you. Like, I was talking to somebody today, and they said, "Oh, that sounds a lot more fun than like these niche podcasts that are like the expertise and really deep and dark stuff and very specific." It's like, hey, like have some fun with it and let the guests kind of drive where the conversation goes. And it's the same thing for me. It's like, it's just delightful to own it, be able to do whatever I want with it. And it's been a ton of fun for me. So this is great because you got like an original podcaster and kind of the other end of the spectrum, like a pretty new podcaster connecting on a podcast. So how cool is that?
Very meta. Yeah. And you're right. There's there's a lot of people that are like, I interview entrepreneurs and talk about entrepreneurship and how you can be an entrepreneur too. And it's like, okay, cool, but kind of sounds like a circle jerk. Not saying yours is, but just kind of sort of sounds like one. And then there's a lot of like, like we said before, the 50-year-old Central Florida entrepreneur dog owners, and you're like, cool, if you're cool with that. And I'm not saying it's like a bad idea. It's just if you're, in fact, it's a great idea if you're doing it because you care about the subject and you're not trying to monetize it. You know, like that's the best shows around are the ones where people do it because they're like, nope, I just really like geodes. That's why I've got the geode show. And you're like, you know what? You're doing it right because you're having fun. You're enjoying it. It's when I see people that are like, I'm going to do this for 2 years and ... profit. I'm just like, you better find another angle because this is a personality driven business. And if you're going to get a show that's got 50,000, 500,000 downloads an episode, like you're going to have to do a lot of work that most people are not willing to do. I always tell these people who want to monetize or get into the business of podcasting, I go, you realize that this is like the crappiest way I've ever found to make money, right?
Exactly.
like this is, don't get me wrong, like the Jordan Harbinger show luckily is now after 14 years to an overnight success, this is a multi like 7-figure business, to be fully candid. But there are, I think we're in the 0.1% of listeners in terms of quantity. So think about the 0.1%. And then additionally, it's like all I've done full time for years and years and years and years and years. And it just doesn't make sense to try compete in this particular sandbox. It would be like going, you know what? I kind of like baseball. Maybe I'll play for the Yankees. Like it doesn't work like that. It happens over time. And like, there's something to be said when people go, oh, you look at this guy bigging himself up. Look, real talk. I started in 2006. There's something to be said for first or early to market advantage. Like I picked up tens of thousands of listeners, many of whom still listen, starting in 2006, 2007. And I routinely get emails from people that are like, yeah, found you in 2010, found you in 2012, found you in 2011, found you in 2015. That's 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. Like it's just such a slow as molasses way to build an audience. And so that's why I never recommend it for people who just want to make money. Cause it's just like, you not only are you kind of late to the party, but even if you were on time, it's still going to take you so much longer to build an audience. And if you don't care, then good. You're probably the right kind of person. Just like being a writer, you know, you ever talk to like a really good writer and they're always like, as long as you don't expect to make any money, you'll be happy with the amount of money you make writing.
I actually, I had this conversation with somebody. They're like, so your podcast, what's your monetization strategy? And I'm like, I don't have one. And they're like, well, what's your point then? I'm like, it's fun and I enjoy it. And they're like, oh, well, when are you going to make money? And I'm like, probably never. And that's cool. Like, it's just like a fun thing that I enjoy doing, putting out in the world. And because like, I think a lot of people don't understand that. And I kind of had an idea, but when I started to do the research, just as a business person before actually launching it, I'm like, oh, what does this mean? I'm like, oh yeah, this is not going to pay the bills. Like there's just no way, which is not something I was ever, but there's just no way.
No, I mean, even when people go, oh yeah, well, look at, and then they name them like some huge company that
Mark Maron or Dax Shepard. Yeah,
look at Mark Maron, look at Dax Shepard, look at Joe Rogan. And I'm like, cool. That's like saying you're on a college radio station, but look at Howard Stern, look at Ryan Seacrest. It's like, I'm looking at them and I'm looking at you and I'm not seeing a whole lot of overlap with that Venn diagram there, bro.
Exactly. Yeah. That's funny.
Not that people can't get there. Of course. I don't want to be discouraging, but I will tell you that like, year 7 of podcasting, which a lot of people don't even think about that. 7 years in, Robert Greene, the author, said, hey, you're pretty good at this. And I was like, oh, maybe I should double down on this. You know, then years like 7 through 10, I worked really hard at everything from the vocal tonality to cadence to show prep. And then years like 10 through 13, I worked on different kinds of guests, getting expertise in different areas, technical skills, audio editing skills, audio engineering skills. Now we're in year 14 and I'm going over everything else with a fine tooth comb.
Yeah.
And, you know, really like I can look back when I met my wife, my now wife, we met in 2013 and I had nothing to do. I was making pretty much no money at all. And I could barely afford a car. I think I had my dad helping me at age 32 or 33. My dad worked for Ford at the time, and he was like, I can get you a car for like dirt cheap using this like employee plan. And he's like,
Yeah.
I'll give you $2,000 this year, and that'll help you like lease this car. And then I had to pay him back, which I did. That's what I was doing 7 years ago. And
Yeah.
now I can do whatever I want because my income has gone up exponentially every single year, which is great. But it took like a solid 6-7 years before I started making any money. And then it took another like 5 years before I was like, this is a good business.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on all your success with that. I know it's
it's
like they say, like you said earlier, it's like the 14-year overnight success.
Exactly. Yeah. 10 years to an overnight success is, I think, what people say. Because it's funny. People will ask me, they'll go, how did you grow your podcast so quickly? And I go, man, I've been doing this for 14 something years. And they go, oh, I'm sorry. I just heard about you 2 months ago. And I go, exactly. Exactly. You just heard about me. But before that, I know this is hard to put together, but I existed before you heard about me. Like I was doing this. I was still living, eating, breathing, paying bills, or trying to. And, it's like, oh, okay. I didn't grow it fast. You just noticed it late, or you noticed it recently. It's like nobody hits an iceberg in the middle of the ocean and goes, but it's just this little tiny triangle of ice. It's like, there's other stuff going on in the business, So I always tell people this, and I try to communicate that to people who want to start media or new podcasts, because I go, this is by far one of the worst. Like there are dollar for dollar, or I should say hour for hour, you're probably going to make more, at least for the first 5 to 10 years, bagging groceries or making lattes as you will podcasting hour for hour. And then if you are super lucky and you are hardworking and luck and hard work and maybe like a dash of talent, which I certainly don't think that I have. I got a lot of luck and I work really hard. Then you can start being one of those people that like quits their day job doing this. And again, I got super lucky with a lot of things, including starting, 10 years before everybody else even heard of podcasting.
Yeah. Well, this actually leads me to the next question that I'm actually curious where you're going to take this. I actually have no idea. I have an intuition on it, but I will see. So Jordan, what's something that's inside of your comfort zone that what you would say is outside of somebody else's comfort zone?
Oh yeah. I hear about this all the time. So for example, people will go, well, you're just going to go talk to Kobe Bryant? And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be great if we don't have any issues, And they're like, but aren't you freaking out? And I'm like, no, I'm not. What if what if this happens? What if that happens? I mean, I can't believe you're not nervous. And I'm like, dude, he already said yes. Like the thing I'm most nervous about is like showing up late or missing my flight or like, the camera turning off in the middle or something like that. Or, that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about he has concrete floors and too much glass and it sounds bad. Like that's where I'm worried. I'm not trying to become friends with him or anything. He's not going to call me after the interview and be like, yo, let's hang out, bro. That's not going to happen. So like, I think for a lot of people, they go, I just would be so nervous. And I'm thinking, by the time I've read the book and watched the movies and looked at the YouTube and read the Wikipedia, I'm already halfway sick of the guest. I'm like the interview is like the top of it, and then I'm done. Like I don't ever want to see their crap again for a year because I'm over it.
Funny.
Yeah,
that's funny. That makes a lot of sense. So now flip the script on that. What about something that's outside of your comfort zone that's inside of somebody else's?
Like what? Let's see. I mean, there's got to be plenty of this stuff. I don't really know. Like, I wouldn't try to cut my own hair, but that's not exactly what you're asking me. I don't know. I'm not really into adventure sports.
Yeah.
Like when people are like, yeah, man, let's go snowboard. Let's go hella skiing. I'm like,
skiing,
no, I'm good.
skiing.
I'm good. I am solidly a no on that,
Yeah.
And
well, especially that you're a dad now.
Well, I'm a dad and it's $50,000 or what. I mean, it's probably not $50,000, but it's expensive. And I've got kids and I'm like, I don't need to be a quadriplegic because for adrenaline, I'm fine. Like I'm an indoor kid, man.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. A long time ago, we were in Norway and there's this place in Norway that's where they do base jumping. And I said, what kind of crazy do you have to be to decide that skydiving is just not enough for you anymore? And you have to just run off a cliff and jump off it. And like every year it's like 30 to 40 people, I think every year like die doing that because they parachute and then like swing back around and hit the cliff wall. It's literally it's like a 2,000 sheer cliff wall. And we watched them do it. It's amazing to watch I'm like, you got to have some serious ability to get you need some serious adrenaline in your life if that's something you actually want to do. Like run off a cliff and jump, and then hope your parachute when you're halfway down just opens up and you don't slam into the wall. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, with the base jumping kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's like specifically base jumping. Like watch them, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm solidly a no on all that stuff, and I know some of those guys. Like I see that stuff happening quite regularly, like in friends' feeds or guys who come on the show. Like I interviewed a climber who climbed the Dawn Wall, which is like this super flat surface in Yosemite. It's the I forget. It's El Capitan, and the Dawn Wall.
Yeah,
is that big flat side. And I'm like, oh, it's funny. We're so far away, it looks flat. And he's like, no. We're talking about like credit card thin edges that you have to grab onto with your fingertips and climb. And I'm like, how is that even freaking possible?
Yeah.
How are you holding your whole body weight on a credit card thin piece of rock? And it takes like I think it took them like 3 weeks or something to climb this. Like, it was horrible. You know, you're sleeping in those little, what are they called, bivouac or whatever they're called, suspended from the sky or the mountain side. And I'm just like, that whole thing is just completely out of my comfort zone. I would never even think to do it. No. And I see people do that kind of thing, and I'm just thinking like, okay, you're obviously wired in a totally different way.
Yeah, that's like what did you see the movie Free Solo?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, watching that movie, I was like, just a hard no. Like, I'm a little bit of an adrenaline person, but that's insane to me. Like, that's crazy. No thanks. No thanks.
It is, yeah. My buddy Tommy Caldwell is the guy I was talking about who I interviewed on the Jordan Harbinger show. Yeah. He was in that movie. He's like Alex Honnold's homie, I guess. You know, the guy who probably makes sure he doesn't fall and die, like runs the belay and climbs with him and all that stuff. So he I mean, you think like, it's funny because you see that movie, you see Free Solo, and you go, oh man, but you used ropes. And he's like, bro, I climbed the Dawn Wall, which nobody's ever done. You know, yes, I used ropes. Are you insane? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's what normal people do.
Yeah.
They climb mountains. And then also, like, he's got his own crazy stories. He went to Kazakhstan or something like that with his girlfriend. Do you know the story?
No.
No. So he went to Kazakhstan with his girlfriend for a climbing expedition. This is years ago. Yeah. And they got like abducted by militia, some sort of like Islamic militia in the middle of the mountains had spotted them on this expedition, started shooting at them with the rifles. They climbed down. God. And then they were getting walked around the mountains for days and days and days, like no food, you know, not resting. Because they were being chased by the Kazakh military. And then after a while, they were like, we're cold, we're tired, we're hungry. If it rains, we're going to die. Oh, and the other militia guys had like run off to go steal supplies or something like that because they were out of everything, and they were with one guy. And they were walking up on this like really thin rocky crag, and he pushed the guy off the mountain and threw him down.
Oh my God.
And then like never quite psychologically recovered from that.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Wow. That's an insane story.
Yeah. I mean, and so you think like you go to climb a mountain thinking it's going to be like a cool big rush, and then you end up with like this, I say bonus, but you know what I mean? Like you end up with this sort of like bonus adrenaline rush. And I'm just like, you know, you're in a sketch country doing like in the middle of nowhere climbing, like not like, what did you think was going to happen? Of course they didn't think that was going to happen, but like I just am not wired to do anything like that. Then again, I went to North Korea on a trip, and I went there like 3 more times, but I don't consider that I don't get a rush from that, right? Like I that's like a different kind of thing. And it's funny because when I talk about this, I'll have friends go, man, that's dumb. And I'm like, you race motorcycles, dude. Shut your face. What are you talking about? That's dumb. Yes, it was. But you have a much higher chance of getting killed and maimed. I have like a dice roll now that like 2020 hindsight had a dice roll or something like that. But like, you know, I'm not going to fall and become disabled. Like I might get arrested or something like that. But I generally behaved myself. And this is also before anybody else had gone and done anything crazy and ended up in a prison over there. This is like 2011, 2012. So this was when nobody really talked about North Korea and they weren't in the news. And, you know, it was before they started arresting random people for saying the wrong thing or something like that. So now I wouldn't go, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were with Dennis Rodman, but you just answered my question.
Yeah. No, I did go at the same time. Yeah.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
So, Jordan, you had mentioned earlier that you've obviously been podcasting for a long time. You're a dad. You're currently in California. I'd love to hear if you'd share a little bit about your journey to what's led us to, here the end of May 2020. A little bit, just a little bit about your journey. Thing you think would be interesting for the audience to share, and then, you've already shared what you're up to today around the podcast. Maybe share a little bit more about that as well.
Sure. So, what exactly was it that you were looking for?
Just your journey to today, like, a little bit about your backstory. I think people are always interested in hearing about, like you said, and we know you've been podcasting. How about before that? What were you up to before that? In terms of college and, stuff like that, and what growing up, what you wanted to do and all that good stuff.
Sure. So I was a Wall Street attorney for a while. I originally started learning about body language and nonverbal communication specifically because I was trying to learn how to make partner at this law firm. And I knew I wasn't the smartest guy at the law firm. And I was a hard worker, but like everybody on Wall Street's a hard worker. So it doesn't even matter. Yeah. Like, it's kind of like that's table stakes are 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. You're not going to outwork anybody on Wall Street unless you live in the office, and some people do. And so I just, honestly, I really did spend a lot of time learning about psychology and persuasion and influence and things like that. And then I was giving talks and teaching about this stuff because it became so important to my career. And then it all sort of got me interested in dating and relationships. And I was like, well, I'm going to use this stuff for dating and relationships. I started doing the podcast originally about that, teaching courses about that, ended up on Sirius XM satellite radio doing call-in advice show about that. And then the 2008 economic crash, as it were. And I kept doing my radio show, and I ended up getting laid off from the law firm along with everyone else. The firm, I think, even went under a few months later. And I was like, I'm just not going to go back to the law because I didn't really want to do it then. And I certainly don't want to do it now. And I'm just going to give it a go with this whole sort of like training company, entrepreneur, podcaster thing. And everyone thought I was crazy. That's the story you hear from everybody else always too. And it was crazy, and it was kind of a bad idea. But I remember like friends of mine saying things like, after law school, saying things like, I'm going to try and make a music career. And I was like, you're crazy. And my buddy goes, well, if not now, then when? And I was like, you know what? Good point, man. We're 27. We've got some student loans that we can sort of defer for a while. The world is our oyster. None of us have kids. None of us are married. None of us have responsibilities other than student loans. Like, your responsibilities to yourself. So now is the time to try this stuff. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. If you're going to play the harmonica at a bar every day and strum and play Beatles covers or whatever, I'm going to if that is no dumber than what I'm doing, or what I'm doing is no dumber than that, right? In terms of economic sense. And we started making a little bit of money training, and the show started to go well. And I ran into a bunch of problems with the people I was working with, moved from New York City to California, which was cheaper because, rent in New York was like insane. I think with the office space we had like $20,000 a month in rent. And then in California, it was like, you mean we can do this all from a 2-bedroom? And of course, we rented an apartment in Hollywood that had like a pool, tons of women lived there. It was like this super dope spot. And it was like, probably, I think our rent was probably $3,500 a month or some crap like that. And I thought, this is the bomb. And this is dirt cheap. Look at this. And everyone else is like, why do you live in a place that expensive? I was like, I came from Manhattan. This is half off.
Right.
Yeah. So we lived there for a while. And then I realized that I really kind of didn't love talking about dating and relationships, it started to feel kind of silly. It started to feel kind of trite. I was in my early 30s at that point, and or maybe I just turned 30. I can't remember. And I met my wife, or soon-to-be wife, shortly thereafter, and I was like, I really don't want to talk about dating and relationships. So I started to grow apart. I started to grow apart from my business partners because they were like trying to do this dating and relationship thing. They weren't very successful in their relationships, as it were. And I was like, I just want to like get married, have kids, buy a house, but I love podcasting. And I followed my gut, and instead of forcing the square peg through the round hole and doing different topics about dating and relationships, I just was like, I'm going to interview this scientist. I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to talk to that person. And that was when I started to get the feeling like, oh, I'm okay at this. I'll have a best-selling author on, or a legendary whatever, and they'll go, hey, that was pretty good for a podcast. Never done one of these. Didn't realize, I thought these were a bunch of nerds in a basement. And I was like, they are, and I am too, but thank you for the high praise.
That's awesome.
And it was cool. I distinctly remember Robert Greene, author of 48 Laws of Power, Mastery, among other things, Laws of Human Nature, saying, hey, this is good. You should, you found your calling. And I was like, what? Because it's one thing when you hear it from somebody who's like a random blogger and you go, well, okay, thanks. But when you hear it from somebody who is just a legend in their field, and they're not just blowing sunshine up your skirt, so to speak, because who is it? Why would he lie to me on Skype? What's the point?
Right.
What
exactly.
What sort of incentive is there for that? And he just had a lot of kind words for me there. And I thought, this is really cool. This is like a very cool thing to have happen. Maybe I should double down on that. And that was sort of the beginning. And that was 7 years in, like I mentioned earlier on the show.
Yeah.
And that really got me into it. And I went, if I'm not going to half-ass this, I really need to get into it. So instead of recording, like using my laptop speakers on Skype and using free stuff, I went to Guitar Center and I spent a few grand on really good gear that I had no clue how to use.
Yeah.
And I sat there for weeks and weeks and weeks. And every free minute that I had, I just tweaked stuff. And I would Google how this worked and how that worked. And I would call friends and ask for advice and everything, back and forth, back and forth. And I would just constantly tweak stuff. And then I realized, oh, okay, now I'm sort of like a DIY audio engineer. And then I realized, I can't, if I'm going to learn the gear, I need to learn the soft skills too. Just like I was teaching body language, persuasion, and influence, which are soft skills, I need to learn interview and talk show skills. So I started studying Larry King, Howard Stern, Charlie Rose, all these folks, and figuring out what it was they were doing. Terry Gross, what are they doing that I can use in my own show and in my own life? And that was the beginning. That was the second beginning of the journey, 7 years, 8 years in. So that's why I'm always looking at this whole business and this whole talk show game with a long-term perspective, a long-term lens, because that to me has been the key. If I was trying to monetize this the first year, it wouldn't have worked out. Yeah.
Yeah. I have you went back and listened to any of your earliest episodes?
Yeah, they're pretty gross. Yeah.
I was listening to, I think Tim Ferriss was talking about this on his show like last year at some point. How like he's like, yeah, like I forget exactly, something like the first year. So he's like, I can't even listen to it. It's just so bad. So I in a year or two, I'm going to be probably doing the same thing. Be like, oh, I'm going to listen to that episode of Jordan again and be like, oh God, no,
cringe,
no,
cringe.
But yeah, that's how it goes.
That's the nature. If you listen to your earlier stuff and you go, it's not bad, that's a problem, because it means that where you are now isn't that far away. Like I listened to stuff from 2 years ago and I go, oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's passable. It's not exactly how I would handle it now, but it's passable. It's not bad.
Yeah.
That's okay. But if you're listening to something you did more than a few years ago, it means you're probably not improving enough. And it depends where you are in the process too. Like if you're 1 year into something and you listen to something from 1 weekend, you should cringe. If you're 2 years into something and you listen to something from a year ago, you should cringe. If you're 10 years into something and you listen to something from 2 years ago, you probably aren't going to have that much of a cringe reaction, because your progress generally starts to level off at a certain point. It doesn't mean you're not going to get any better, but it means now instead of getting 1,000% better each year, I might be getting like 10% better each year. And now when I look at coaching and stuff like that, say for voice or anything that I'm doing, whether it's a Mandarin Chinese lesson or anything, I'm thinking, how can I get 1% better over the next like weeks, months, whatever it is? That's the key. You know, you're not going to have the same rate of progress, and you can really see successful versus not super successful people by the amount of things they stick with when that starts to plateau a little bit. Because I know tons of people, I'm sure we all do, where as soon as their progress starts to level off a little bit, they kind of get bored because they need constant self-reinforcement. So they get bored and they quit and they're like, oh, I'm not getting any better at this. And it's like, well, yeah, you crossed over like the beginning of the learning curve and you're constantly seeking novelty or something new. And, you know, that can be fine if you want to get sort of decent at a bunch of different skills. That's fine. You don't have to be a race car driver. You can be a regular driver, and then you can learn how to ride a motorcycle and a bicycle and a hang glider and whatever you want. But if you do it in relationships or something like that, you're in trouble. You know, like if you're one of those people who's constantly seeking novelty, like it can be a problem.
Yeah, I'm married as well. I have a 4-year-old. And I was just thinking when you were saying that, I'm like, that would go really well with your wife when you'd be like, I feel like I've gotten at about 95% of my capacity in this marriage. So I'm really going to go try something different because I feel like I've achieved almost mastery here. Are you cool with that? That sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I realize there's not a whole lot more I can learn from you. So.
or show up or be any way to actually show up better for you as a husband. So I think at this point, this is probably the best time. Like we're good where we are. This is the very best you're going to get at this point. That's awesome. That's cool, man. You've had an interesting journey. I was going to mention, I believe you went to the University of Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. You're actually from Michigan originally, aren't you?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. I'm originally from Minnesota, and I actually married a Buckeye. My wife, my wife went to the Ohio State. So, and I went to the University of Minnesota, and as a fellow Big Tenner, you probably know that they're god awful at football almost every year, except for last year. So I actually married somebody where I could actually root for college football because the Gophers are just not that good except for last year. So I don't know if you're a college guy or not, but I actually grew up a big Wolverine fan. They were Michigan when I was in high school in like the late 90s, like the Fab Five basketball team, like they were like the team. Chris Webber.
I do remember that Chris Webber. Geez, wow,
Jalen Rose.
Blast from the past. Yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness. Yeah, I never really got into sports, but that's probably for the best because I wasn't exactly going to go all the way with any of that.
Yeah, you're like, nah, I don't think so. Cool, man. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate hearing about that. It was super interesting. So, what are you passionate about? And I know we've talked about some of this. Like, what's your thing? Like that you're like, this is the thing that I want to do. And you know, you've talked about podcasting. What about something that's outside of like what you do for a living or for like more of a work thing? Like, what are you passionate about outside of work?
Ooh, I'm kind of a workaholic. Let me think. Yeah, that's tough, man. That is tough. I'm kind of a workaholic. And the thing is, with a business that you own, that can be kind of okay. Like my weekend is, you know what I mean? Like it's not like, oh, I'm going to go through and balance my accounting books this weekend. I've got all kinds of tasks that I make for myself that are not necessarily going to contribute in a meaningful way to the business. You know, like I something I'm doing later today is like looking online for artists who can do really a certain type of drawing that I was thinking about having done for every guest on the show, and maybe using it to sort of rebrand our guest show art. And my wife's like, oh, well, okay, that sounds fun. But nobody, you know, when you talk to business people, they're like, oh, that's not going to help you. That's a vanity thing. Like you need to be focused on your metrics. And then those same people go out and buy like a McLaren F1 and then rent a yacht. And I'm like, cool. Yeah. Seems like you're really focused on your metrics. Yeah. So for me, I'm kind of a workaholic, but it's also because I can sort of hobbyitize my business. Like I can buy cool gear to work with. I can buy a different video background. I can set up lights in my studio that I probably really don't need, but are going to be kind of cool and make working more fun. So, you know, I look at things like that and I find myself to be satisfied. And plus, you know, I would say like half my job is reading. So I guess you could say reading, but then again, I'm really only going to read something that's for work because why not? And so there's a whole lot of that in my life.
Yeah. Have you, I guess like coming out of law school and going into as a Wall Street attorney, that was probably perfect for you then. Because you probably like, and did you, like, maybe you didn't enjoy the job, or maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but do you likely enjoyed that atmosphere of being there all the time, working all the time, and driving towards that? Would be my
Kind
guess.
of, but it was like, oh, this would be so great if it wasn't, a law office.
Yeah. You're
That's
like, I
kinda
love
where I
working,
was
just
at.
not doing what I'm working at.
Yeah, like, this is so cool, except it's, a law office.
Yeah. Awesome. What's the thing that you're most proud of in your life?
Probably the business and restarting the business after leaving the old one, building the Jordan Harbinger show up to what it is. I think, though, in the future, that's going to change because I have a 10-month-old and I'm very proud of him, but I didn't really do much. I contributed in a very minor way so far. But I expect that to change later on, of course. And as he grows older, I think he's going to take a more and more sort of central part of my life. Because right now, like when he cries, he doesn't want me. He doesn't care about me holding him. We're kind of in that phase. But later on, it's like, well, no, I mean, this is going to be a great thing for me to be around and working from home so I can spend more time with him like that. That I'm looking forward to. And I think that's probably going to take center stage.
Yeah, I was saying this to another guest today. Every single parent who comes on here, the thing they're most proud of is always their kids. Like, except for like people with kids under the age of like 6. Like, same thing. Me, like, I'm very proud of my daughter, but like she hasn't really done anything yet except have a lot of fun. And I remember for me, like, I didn't really enjoy the first year either because I've kind of felt the way it sounds like you feel is like I'm kind of here and the kid kind of likes me, but she doesn't really need anything from me at this point. There's nothing I can really do for her other than like smile and play with her. But all the biological needs that are so key in the first year, like those are not, I'm not fulfilling any of those. So I'm like here as like, I'm here as the dude on the side to like change diapers and stuff. But I mean, I'm sure you know this. It gets super fun. And is he getting close to walking yet? Is he starting to stand up on furniture?
Yeah,
or anything?
he stands up, he holds on to stuff, and then like can do what's called cruising, where he'll stand and then they use their hands to sort of like you would walk if you were walking over something really high, like one of those.
Yeah.
You're walking on a rope bridge across a mountain chasm, so you're holding on the ropes with both hands. He can do that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, he's good. He's not too far away then from
no,
taking
what
the
I
independent steps.
Yeah, from what I understand is like, and every day he builds more and more strength. Like I would say last Monday he was trying to crawl up a flight of stairs and it was really hard and it took forever. And now he can basically scamper up the flight of stairs.
Yeah.
And it's been like 2 weeks, Yeah,
man, it accelerates quickly. And then you're going to be like, hey, remember how cool it was when you could put him down and knew where he was going to be when you look back?
Yeah. No, we used to, even a couple weeks ago, we were like, oh, just put big pillows around the outside of the bed and he can't fall off. And now he's like, not only am I going to crawl over that, but if it's in my way enough, I'm just going to fling it. And we're like, okay, you can pick that up now. Like you can crawl over that now.
Yeah.
And so
awesome.
it is awesome. But yeah, it's a little bit like, oh, we've got to lower the mattress in the crib because now he can pull himself up and climb out and then fall. Because he still hasn't quite figured out, like, hey, you don't want to be on the edge of the couch because you will fall down from there. Like, he just kind of hasn't picked up on that yet. Yeah,
that's cool, man. Well, congratulations again to you and your wife.
Thank you.
Next question, as we start to get to the end of the time here. Here's a little, I call this the introspective question or vulnerability question. We'll see. Jordan, what's something that you're afraid might actually be true about you?
Let's see. What am I afraid might actually be true about me? What am I afraid? I mean, I think every guy's kind of afraid of taking on all the negative characteristics they got from their dad. Maybe I'm still going to have a short temper like my dad did when my kid's a teenager. I do worry about that kind of thing. But that's less about me, I guess. It's not like, oh, I'm worried the world's going to find out I'm a fraud. Like, I don't really worry about that whole thing.
Yeah.
I did for a while, but now I'm like, fraud what? I'm a podcaster. Isn't that kind of the definition of somebody who's hacking it together?
That's awesome.
But like, I think, I do worry like, am I going to be sort of like judgmental and abrasive when my kid says something, or like try to put my input everywhere. Because I do have those characteristics. They show up on the Jordan Harbinger show. Am I going to be able to sort of resist doing that as a parent? I don't know. I mean, I'm aware of it, which helps. I don't think my dad was even remotely aware of it. So there's that.
Yeah.
But impulse control is it's a completely different animal.
Yeah. Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. I've never had that direct answer, but I have had somebody else, a couple other people say, like, I'm afraid that I'm actually a lot like either my mother or my father. And I totally identify with that as well, both good and bad. I mean, yeah, it's actually funny. I don't know if you've thought a lot about this, but as a parent, you're always like, oh, I'm never going to be like my parents. And then suddenly you're like I'm looking at my wife and looking at me, and I'm like, oh wait, that's exactly what I would say. Yep. Oh crap. Yep. Here it comes. And someday my daughter will be going, you're so annoying and you're just like this. And I'm like, yeah, crap. You turn into your parents. I think it's in a way, it's like inevitable for us.
Yeah, it's genetic though too. Like they know that a lot of personality components are genetic, and it's like, okay, that makes sense, because it's like you learned this from your father, and it's like, well, yeah, but then they find adopted kids that like grew up in a totally different environment, and they have tons of personality traits, just like their biological parents. Yeah. So it's kind of a relief, because it's a little bit like, oh, okay, this was maybe a little bit unavoidable and I can work on it, but it's not like I did a bunch of stuff wrong, Yeah,
exactly.
That's always nice.
So Jordan, what's your general philosophy on life? So like what I mean by that is how do you get up in the morning? How do you view the world, and like what do you choose every day, or like how do you choose to see the world?
Well, I don't really consciously think about this very often. I've got my own thing going, and I plan my days out in advance, and I try not to be overly competitive with random strangers on the internet. More recently, that's become more acute for me, but also it's been something I've worked on. Like I never cared. I never looked at social media, and I will say that Instagram specifically has made it much worse. And I don't know if it's something about Instagram specifically, or if my life circumstances changed. But before, when I just sort of occasionally used Facebook and Twitter, I never really had FOMO because I just didn't care. And now I started using Instagram more, and I'm just like, this sucks. Like all I'm doing is looking at things that I'm not doing that other people are doing. And I just know also too many influencers and people that are YouTubers or people that are successful business folks, being in the game for 15 years, 14 years, and knowing a bunch of behind the scenes stuff. I know that, and this is cliche, but not everything is as it appears. Some of these people where you go, God, they're making like $10 million a year. They're spending $9.9 million of those dollars trying to look as famous as possible.
Totally.
And like you see these guys that are like, yeah, I'm making this, I'm making that. And then like a year later, they get divorced and their wife takes the kids, and it's like really acrimonious. And you go, oh, you're a bastard. Got it. Okay. Like now it all makes sense. And, I even see people I know that look like they have everything going for them. And then like a few months later, they'll give me a call and they're like, how do I get into podcasting? I hate my business. And I'm just thinking, oh, weren't you giving talks before about how great and how effort-free your bull crappy penny stock trading scam was? And they're like, yeah, but I can't sleep at night and I've got anxiety. And I'm like, yeah, you're a con artist. You're supposed to feel bad about it,
Yeah.
So it really is kind of nice there is an element of luxury of, like I said, I guess I said this earlier in the show, but there is an element of luxury in reading a book that I'm interested in, calling the author and being like, want to come have an hour-long conversation with me? If, you have no reason to do so whatsoever. Oh yeah. And do your hair and makeup because we're going to film it. That kind of thing is awesome. Most people can never do that. And I see people who should be really happy with themselves in my situation, and they're like chasing fame now, or they like move to Hollywood and they want to be on television. And I'm just like, oh, you've turned winning the game into you never being able to win the game because you just keep moving the goalposts. And they call it like, got to keep moving forward. And I'm like, you're not moving forward. You're freaking miserable.
Right.
But you look like you're moving forward because you keep achieving, but like you're not a happy person. You're one of the most miserable people I know. You don't have any friends. Your girlfriend left you. Like, tell me where you're winning again.
Yeah, that's good. Well, the philosophy I heard in all of that is something around like just being comfortable with who you are and what you're up to. And it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. You're confident in your approach and you're yeah, like confident in your like and confident in like knowing what you want to achieve and going towards that without getting distracted. Like I agree with you, and I'm guilty to sometimes too. So easy to get distracted by like how many followers they have or what they're doing or like, you know, how many listeners you have. It's like, yeah, just stick to your lane, do your thing, and like it's all good. It's just so much happier that way. I know a lot of people that in the same way that you were just describing that are like, and you worked on Wall Street. Like I live in New York City, man. I know a lot of Wall Street people. Like, most of them are not very happy
Yeah,
people.
and it's
Yeah.
in part of it's because of stress and the amount of hours they work, but a lot of it is FOMO, you know. And like I said, I didn't have that before. I was just like, this is great, kind of bumbling along, making plenty of money, it's all good. But like then you see some other schmuck that you think you're better than, and they're doing something according to Instagram, and you're like, oh, I'm not doing that. And then I talk to all these guys that have kids, and they're like, don't worry about that. None of that matters at all. And I go, oh,
Yeah,
right,
totally.
that's true. But you have to constantly remind yourself of it, or you can really get sucked into, well, I've got to scale this way and I've got to scale that way and I've got to do things this way. And it's like, what are you doing? Like you turned something you loved that was making you a good living, and now you're making everyone around you miserable. You're making yourself miserable. Like you can really decide to be unhappy even though you have everything. You really can.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so getting close to the end here today, want to come back and ask you if there's anything else that you'd like to share with the audience, either that I asked you about that popped up for you while you were speaking, or just anything you'd like to, anything you'd like to share with the audience at this point.
You know, look, I appreciate the opportunity to come on. I hope people like learning and improving. You know, that's been my passion for a while, and I think people should be building their network right now, especially during these times. Like this is the time to continue to increase your relationships and help other people without the expectation of anything in return. And the more that people do that, the better off they're going to be. And I just hope that your listeners would be interested in this conversation and would therefore be interested in checking out the Jordan Harbinger show, because I always like more smart, interesting people to come by and tell me what they think.
Yeah, absolutely. And leads me to the next question. How can the audience find you? And before we actually answer that, I want to give a plug. I know you have a super cool, like a networking 6-minute networking thing that you're up to. Want to see if you want to just mention that really quickly for the audience as well, because it's super cool.
Yeah, so I've got a course called 6-Minute Networking. It's free. It's about building and maintaining relationships with people, either for business or personal reasons. Doesn't really matter. And it's you're supposed to do it in a consistent way, right? It just takes a few minutes a day. People think like, oh, networking, I don't want to like go to mixers and stuff. And I'm like, oh, you don't have to, use your phone to do it. Text people, keep up on social media, use specific habits to make sure you're talking to people. Dig the well before you get thirsty is the way we phrase it, because a lot of people, when COVID hit, they're like, oh my God, how do I find a new job? And I'm like, do you remember when I told you a year ago to dig the well before you get thirsty? And they're like, yeah, but I was busy. I'm like, well, you're not busy now, are you? And they're like, oh, what do I do though? I didn't dig the well. And I'm like, you start now. And they're like, yeah, but what's like the shortcut? Because I need a job. And I'm like, the shortcut is start a decade ago. The shortcut is make sure that this is in place. And they're just, and so I think a lot of people should be really careful about that, because you can very easily shoot yourself in the foot by thinking that you're never going to get thirsty. And that's the mistake that unsuccessful people make all the time, that people who really take one in the chin make all the time. They go, well, I probably won't. I mean, I literally hear some version of this every single day. I don't know if I need that. I'm a teacher. Oh, really? What happens when you've got to switch jobs? Well, I probably that won't happen to me. Why would that not happen to you?
Right.
Oh, well, we have a union. Cool. What happens if you get married and your husband gets transferred and then you got to find a job? Oh, well, I didn't really think about that. That's the kind of thing. Or what happens when your school district jerks you around for the 50th time and you're just like, to hell with this? Then what do? You're trapped. Right. You don't have a network. How are you going to find another career? So this is the key to having opportunity coming into your life. It's the key to maintaining good, close friendships. It's the key to social status and we see like longevity, happiness, like these things are all very intimately tied to your social network. And so if people aren't maintaining that, you're risking your health, you're risking your career, you're risking your financial well-being. So I'm thinking people should definitely check it out. And I give this away for free because it's like a service, and it's at jordanharbinger.com/course. And it literally takes like 6 minutes a day. That's the idea.
Cool, man. Thank you. Where else can the audience connect with you? I mean, you got the podcast, you've got the courses online. What else? Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook?
Yeah, they can add me on LinkedIn, Jordan Harbinger, or I'm at Jordan Harbinger on Twitter and on Instagram.
Cool. And I'll obviously add all this to the show notes as well.
Great.
And Jordan, I want to thank you so much for being on today. Tradition I have on the show is that I have a guest, every guest leave all of us with words of wisdom, and the words of wisdom should fit on a Post-it note. So something short and sweet that somebody could either throw on their desktop or write down in the journal, or for the modern days, put on an Instagram post, and not the text part of it. Because somebody said, oh, I actually said this to a guest, and they're like, so the Instagram post, is it like the artwork part of it or like the text underneath it? I'm like, bro, just the artwork. It's like, I shouldn't have to explain this. So yeah, what do you want to leave us with in terms of words of wisdom?
Sure. I would say leave everything and everyone better than you found it. If you go through life thinking like that, leave everything and everyone better than you found it, you won't always succeed, but it's a good way to go into an interaction with someone else.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jordan. Well, thank you so much for being on today, and I wish you the very best to you, your family. Have fun with the soon-to-be walking little one, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.